Kira, after 15 years with TechVantage. We're restructuring your position, Marjorie Thompson announced, her voice carrying a barely concealed note of satisfaction. She sat across from me in the small conference room, flanked by Denise from HR, both of them wearing carefully crafted expressions of corporate regret. The company is moving in a new direction, Denise added, sliding a manila folder across the table. Your contributions have been valuable, but we're consolidating the research division under the product development team. I nodded thoughtfully, accepting the folder without opening it. Inside would be the standard severance package: 2 weeks for every year of service, continued health coverage for 3 months, and a list of career counseling resources I would never use. I completely understand, I replied, my voice steady. These decisions are never easy. Relief flashed across their faces. They'd clearly expected tears, protests, anger. After all, I was a 55-year-old woman being pushed out of the tech industry, where youth was prized above experience. What they didn't know was that I had anticipated this moment for weeks, ever since a misdirected email thread had appeared in my inbox last month. We'd like you to clean out your desk by Friday, Marjorie continued, gaining confidence from my apparent acceptance. We'll need your keycard, company laptop, and phone before you leave. Your team will be notified this afternoon. My team. 6 brilliant engineers I had personally recruited and mentored over the years. The same team that helped me develop the distributed processing algorithm that now powered TechVantage's flagship product, AccountSphere, accounting software used by over 40% of Fortune 500 companies. Of course, I said, rising from my chair. Is there anything else? They exchanged glances, clearly thrown by my composure. Marjorie recovered first. That's all for now. Thank you for making this professional. As I walked back to my office, I passed the glass-walled conference room where the executive team was meeting. Through the transparent barrier, I could see CEO Victor Lawson gesturing animatedly at a PowerPoint presentation titled Q3 Revenue Projections. The same Victor Lawson who had taken credit for my algorithm at last year's industry conference, referring to me only as one of our research team members. I closed my office door and pulled out my personal phone, sending a single text message. It's happening. Friday is my last day. The response came immediately. Perfect timing. Contracts are ready. Dinner tonight to finalize details. I smiled as I looked at the calendar on my desk. Today was Wednesday. Friday, I would leave TechVantage for the last time. And Monday? Monday would be fascinating. That evening, I met Gregory Sullivan at Meridian, an upscale restaurant far from TechVantage's headquarters. As the CEO of Precision Systems, TechVantage's largest competitor, Gregory knew the value of discretion. He'd reserved a private dining alcove in the back, shielded from curious eyes by elegant Japanese screens. They actually did it, Gregory said, shaking his head after we ordered. I suspected they might. But to cut the very person who developed their core technology. Victor never understood what I actually created, I replied, sipping my water. He saw the implementation, the user interface, the marketing potential. But the underlying architecture, that was just tech stuff to him. The irony was almost too perfect. 3 months ago, I discovered that the patent application for my distributed processing algorithm had never been filed by TechVantage's legal team, an oversight they'd claimed when I inquired. They'd assured me they'd handle it immediately, but something about their response had seemed off, prompting me to dig into the company's internal documentation. That's when I found it, a strategy memo, outlining plans to claim the algorithm as company-developed technology, without specific inventor attribution. They'd planned to push me out before securing the patent, knowing that intellectual property developed by employees typically belongs to the company. What TechVantage didn't know was that I'd already been working on refinements to the algorithm on my own time, using my personal equipment, on personal hours. Those improvements, which dramatically increased processing efficiency by 43%, weren't covered by my employment agreement. I'd quietly filed for a patent under my own name last month, fully documented, time-stamped, development logs that clearly showed the work was completed entirely outside of company time. Or the patent had been granted with remarkable speed, thanks to Gregory's introduction to a top-tier IP attorney. All the paperwork is finalized, Gregory said, sliding a folder across the table. As soon as you sign, Precision Systems officially acquires exclusive licensing rights to your patent. The press release goes out Monday morning, announcing you as our new Chief Innovation Officer. I reviewed the documents carefully, though I'd already memorized the key terms. A 7-figure signing bonus, substantial equity in Precision Systems, and ongoing royalties from every product that used my algorithm. What do you think Victor's face will look like when he realizes what's happened? Gregory asked, unable to hide his satisfaction. I'm more concerned about my team, I admitted. They don't deserve to be caught in the fallout. Gregory nodded. Already addressed. We have positions for all 6 of them, if they're interested. Senior roles, significant raises. I signed the final page and closed the folder. In one elegant move, I had secured my future, protected my team, and positioned myself for everything that was coming next. To new beginnings, Gregory said, raising his glass. And to owning your own value, I added, clinking mine against his. Thursday and Friday passed in a blur of exit interviews, knowledge transfer meetings, and saying goodbye to colleagues. I maintained my professional composure throughout, even as rumors spread across the company. Administrative assistants gave me sympathetic glances in the hallways. Junior developers approached awkwardly, asking if I'd provide LinkedIn recommendations before I left. I documented everything meticulously, every project, every password, every process, knowing full well that TechVantage would soon discover just how thoroughly they needed me to be. My decision to leave comprehensive transition notes wasn't kindness. It was evidence that I had acted in good faith, while the company had not. During my final exit interview on Friday afternoon, Denise from HR went through the standard checklist with mechanical efficiency. You understand that any intellectual property developed during your employment remains the property of TechVantage, she stated, pushing a non-disclosure agreement across the table. Of course, I replied pleasantly. Or anything developed within the scope of my employment, using company resources, during company time. I emphasized those qualifiers slightly. But Denise was too busy checking boxes to notice. And you affirm you have no copies of proprietary company information? I have taken nothing that belongs to TechVantage, I confirmed, truthfully. Because the patent was mine, developed on my own time, with my own equipment. There was nothing of theirs to take. As I packed the personal items from my desk, family photos, a collection of conference badges marking 15 years of industry events, the coffee mug my team had given me last Christmas, Marjorie stopped by, leaning against my doorframe with artificial casualness. I just wanted to check that everything's clear for your departure, she said, watching me place items into a cardboard box. Well, crystal clear, I replied, wrapping a small award I'd received for the very algorithm now at the center of my plans. The irony wasn't lost on me as I carefully placed it between layers of tissue paper. You know, Kira, these restructuring decisions are never personal, Marjorie continued. Victor feels the company needs to move in a more youthful direction. I looked up, meeting her gaze directly. I understand completely. Business is business. Something in my tone made her pause. Uncertainty flickered across her face, but she quickly dismissed it. What could a soon-to-be unemployed 55-year-old woman possibly do? Will you be taking some time off? She asked, an artificial note of concern in her voice. Actually, I already have something lined up, I replied. I start Monday. Oh. Surprise crossed her features. That's fast. Anything interesting? I smiled. Very. A leadership position. I'm quite excited about it. She nodded absently, already mentally moving on to other matters. Well, good luck with that. As I walked out of TechVantage's glass headquarters for the final time, keycard surrendered, personal belongings in tow, I took a moment to look back at the building where I'd spent 15 years of my career. On the top floor, I could see the executive conference room lit up for an evening meeting, likely discussing how to redistribute my responsibilities among younger, less experienced, and significantly less expensive staff. Little did they know that in less than 72 hours, that same room would be hosting an emergency crisis meeting. If you are still watching this right now, this story is for you. Not just Kira's story, but the story of everyone who has ever been dismissed, underestimated, or quietly shoved aside by people who had no idea what they were actually standing on. My mother told me nobody would care about stories like this one, that I wouldn't even reach 1,000 subscribers on this channel. And maybe she's right. Maybe the numbers never come. But I believe, with everything in me, that stories like Kira's deserve to be heard. Because somewhere right now, there is a person sitting at a desk they've given 15 years to, feeling invisible. And this story is for that person. If you believe these stories matter, if you've ever been the person in that conference room, hit that like button. Subscribe. Share this with someone who needs it tonight. Let's prove something together. Now, back to Kira. Because Monday morning is about to hit TechVantage like a freight train they never saw coming, Monday arrived like any other day at TechVantage's headquarters on the corner of Meridian and 5th. The lobby buzzed with the usual morning energy. Employees scanning badges, coffee cups in hand, conversations about weekend plans still trailing off. By 9 a.m., Victor Lawson was in his usual spot, the glass-walled executive suite on the 42nd floor, reviewing the morning's financial dashboard, confident and unhurried. By 9:07 a.m., his phone rang. It was the head of TechVantage's legal department. By 9:09 a.m., Victor had gone completely still. The Precision Systems press release had gone live at exactly 8 a.m., picked up immediately by TechCrunch, Forbes, and the Wall Street Journal's technology desk. The headline read, Precision Systems appoints Kira Donahue as Chief Innovation Officer. Exclusive licensing deal for breakthrough processing algorithm signals. Major competitive shift. The article went on to explain that the 43% efficiency improvement in distributed processing technology, the improvement that would now power Precision Systems' entire next-generation product suite, had been developed independently by Donahue outside of her former employment. The patent, filed under her name and now exclusively licensed to Precision Systems, was fully protected. Victor's legal team read it twice, then called him again. How is this possible? Victor demanded, pacing his office. The filing timestamps are airtight, the lead attorney said carefully. She used personal equipment, undocumented personal time. Her employment agreement covers company time development only. We have no claim. She was using our resources, our servers, She wasn't. We've already reviewed the technical logs. The development environment she used was completely separate. She was meticulous. Victor set the phone down on his desk without hanging up. For a long moment, the most powerful man in the company just stood there, staring at the city skyline beyond his floor-to-ceiling windows. The same skyline Kira had looked up at for 15 years. Down the hall, Marjorie Thompson had just read the same press release on her tablet. Her coffee sat untouched, going cold. She thought about that final conversation in the hallway. The quiet smile. The words she'd dismissed without a second thought. Actually, I already have something lined up. Very. A leadership position. I'm quite excited about it. The weight of those words, and how lightly she'd waved them away, settled over her now like a stone. By 10:30 a.m., TechVantage's stock had dropped 4.2%. By noon, it had dropped another 3.8%. The market had read the announcement clearly. AccountSphere, the product used by 40% of Fortune 500 companies, ran on a processing algorithm that now belonged, in its most advanced form, to their biggest competitor. TechVantage still had rights to the original architecture, but the new version, the faster, more efficient version that every enterprise client would eventually demand, was Precision Systems exclusively. And Precision Systems' new Chief Innovation Officer had already begun announcing she would build something even better. Inside TechVantage, the day spiraled fast. Emergency meetings were called and called again. The board of directors requested a briefing by early afternoon. Analysts were already filing updates to their coverage, none of them flattering. But the crisis Victor hadn't planned for wasn't just financial. It was personal. By Tuesday morning, 3 of Kira's former team members had submitted their resignations. By Wednesday, 2 more followed. And by Thursday, the 6th and final member of the research division handed in his notice, accepting a senior engineering role at Precision Systems with a 40% salary increase and stock options that made his TechVantage package look like a rounding error. The entire distributed processing research team, the 6 brilliant engineers Kira had personally recruited, trained, and mentored over the years, walked out the door, one by one, quietly, professionally. No drama, no speeches, no public statements. Just gone. And with them went something no corporate strategy memo could account for: institutional knowledge, the unwritten understanding of how the algorithm actually worked, the shorthand, the history, the creative momentum that only comes from a team that has built something together, over years, from scratch. Victor's new youthful direction now had a product with no team who understood its foundation, and a competitor who had the next evolution of that same technology, staffed by the people who built it. He had outsmarted himself completely. The first calls from AccountSphere's enterprise clients started coming in Friday afternoon. Not angry calls. Not yet. These were the polite, measured, carefully worded inquiries from IT directors and procurement officers at Fortune 500 companies. The kind of calls that are really just warnings dressed in business casual language. We've been following the news regarding the Precision Systems announcement. We wanted to understand TechVantage's roadmap going forward. We have a renewal decision coming up in Q4 and wanted to discuss. Victor's sales team fielded 12 such calls on that Friday alone, each one a tiny needle, and collectively, they were drawing blood. Meanwhile, across town at Precision Systems' newly renovated Innovation Center, Kira was in her first full week as Chief Innovation Officer. Her office had floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, warm natural light, a desk that actually felt like it belonged to her, not like a temporary assignment that could be revoked at any moment. She'd spent the first 2 days meeting with her new team, a mix of Precision Systems' existing engineers and 5 of her 6 former TechVantage colleagues who had already started. The 6th was wrapping up his notice period and would arrive the following Monday. The atmosphere was different in ways she couldn't fully put into words at first. Then she realized nobody was performing. Nobody was managing upward. Nobody was crafting their responses carefully to protect themselves from political consequences. They were just working, building something, the way she'd always believed a team should. On Wednesday of her first week, Gregory stopped by her office with 2 cups of coffee and sat across from her, the same relaxed, unhurried energy he'd had at dinner that first night. "How does it feel?" he asked. Kira considered the question. "Like breathing for the first time in a very long time," she said finally. Gregory nodded. He didn't push for more than that. He didn't need to. 3 weeks after the press release, Victor Lawson flew to New York for a private meeting with TechVantage's largest institutional investors. He'd prepared extensively. Slides, financial projections, a carefully rehearsed narrative about strategic pivots and new talent pipelines. But the investors had done their own research. They knew that AccountSphere's core technology was built on an algorithm whose most advanced iteration now sat with a competitor. They knew that the research team responsible for maintaining and advancing that technology had collectively walked out. They knew that 6 of TechVantage's biggest enterprise clients had begun preliminary conversations with Precision Systems about their renewal options. They listened to Victor's presentation with the courteous, unhurried patience of people who have already made up their minds. When he finished, the lead investor, a woman named Patricia Holloway, who had been with the fund for 30 years and had heard every version of every corporate recovery story imaginable, folded her hands on the table. "Victor," she said quietly, "walk me through exactly what Kira Donahue's role was in the development of the AccountSphere algorithm." The silence in the room was immaculate. Victor straightened. "She was a senior member of our research division, one of several contributors to—" "She was the lead architect," Patricia said. Not loudly, not aggressively, just precisely. "We've spoken to 3 of her former colleagues, independently. We understand her specific contributions." Another silence. "And you let her go?" Patricia continued. Not a question. Victor opened his mouth, closed it. "We were restructuring the—" "Victor." Patricia's voice carried the tone of someone who has run out of patience for carefully managed language. "What I need to understand, from a fiduciary standpoint, is how a company that built its most valuable product on a single person's intellectual contribution managed to dismiss that person without securing her IP, her team, or even a non-compete that would have held up in court." The meeting ran 40 minutes over its scheduled time. By the time Victor's car arrived to take him back to the airport, 2 board members had placed calls to the company's governance committee. 6 weeks after Kira walked out of TechVantage for the last time, Victor Lawson announced his resignation as CEO, citing a desire to pursue other opportunities. The official statement was brief and bloodless, the kind of language that had been workshopped by attorneys and PR consultants to say absolutely nothing while technically saying something. But the tech industry is not a large world, and everyone who mattered knew exactly what had happened. Months passed. AccountSphere continued to run. TechVantage had not collapsed. It was too large, too entrenched for that. But the trajectory had shifted unmistakably. Client renewals came in slower, smaller, fewer upgrades, more questions. Precision Systems, on the other hand, launched its next-generation enterprise platform to extraordinary reception. The distributed processing improvements Kira had developed, the same refinements that TechVantage had tried to quietly absorb as their own, were now the beating heart of a product that was outperforming every benchmark in its category. The reviews called it a generational leap. Industry analysts pointed specifically to the architecture, the elegance of it, the efficiency, the way it scaled without the typical bottlenecks that plagued comparable systems. So one analyst wrote, "Whoever designed this understood not just what the technology needed to do today, but what enterprise computing will demand in 10 years. This is the work of someone who has been thinking about this problem for a very long time." Kira read that line twice. Then she set her tablet down and went back to work. Her former team had settled fully into Precision Systems by the time the product launched. The 6 engineers she'd recruited, trained, and stood beside through years of late nights and impossible deadlines. They'd all made the transition. All of them with better titles, better compensation, and, perhaps most importantly, the sense that their work was seen. Not claimed, not absorbed into a company narrative that erased them. Seen. One of them, the youngest of the group, a woman named Adayez, who joined TechVantage 2 years out of college and had Kira as her very first professional mentor, sent her a message the night before the product launch. It read, "I've been thinking about what you told me when I first joined. You said, in this industry, never let someone else hold the story of what you built. I didn't fully understand it then. I think I do now. Thank you for taking us with you." Kira read the message in the quiet of her office, after everyone had gone home. The city lights were soft through the windows. She thought about the moment in that small conference room, Marjorie's barely concealed satisfaction, Denise's clipboard, the manila folder sliding across the table. She thought about the 15 years, the late nights, and the conference presentations where she sat in the third row while Victor stood at the podium. The algorithm she'd built from a blank page and a stubborn conviction that there had to be a better way. She thought about the misdirected email that had started all of this, and how it had landed in her inbox not by accident, she'd come to believe, but by the kind of fortune that favors people who have already done the work to be ready for it. She typed back to Adiz. You always understood it. You just needed the right room to prove it. Here's what I want you to sit with for a moment. Kira did not blow anything up. She did not make a scene. She did not post a long emotional letter on LinkedIn. She did not send a dramatic final email to the all-company distribution list. She did not burn anything down on her way out the door. She was quiet, and she was professional. She was ready. And that readiness, is the part of this story that I think gets missed when people only look at the ending. They see the press release, the stock drop, Victor's resignation, the team exodus, and they think, what a great revenge story. But the revenge, if you want to call it that, had nothing to do with what happened after she walked out on Friday. It had everything to do with what she'd been doing for months before that. Quietly, carefully, without fanfare. The misdirected email that warned her about the plan to push her out? She didn't panic. She planned. The algorithm refinements she'd been developing on her own time? She'd started that work long before she knew she'd need it, because she cared about the problem. Because she was the kind of person who thinks about things at 11 p.m. not because a boss told her to, but because she genuinely couldn't stop. The patent attorney, the meetings with Gregory, the employment agreement she'd read carefully enough years ago to understand exactly what company time and company resources meant. The transition documentation she prepared during her last 2 days, thorough enough to demonstrate good faith, detailed enough to serve as evidence. Every single piece of it was already in place before the manila folder hit the table. That is not luck. That is a life spent taking yourself seriously, even when the people around you refuse to. There is a particular kind of cruelty in being underestimated by people who have benefited from your work. Victor Lawson stood at that podium at the industry conference and referred to the woman who built his company's most valuable asset as one of our research team members. And he genuinely believed, that was sufficient. That the people in the audience, the journalists, the clients, that none of them would look harder, that the woman herself would absorb it quietly and show up again Monday morning. He was wrong on every count. Marjorie Thompson sat across from a 55-year-old woman in a small conference room and concluded, within seconds of seeing her calm face, that there was nothing to worry about, that the composure meant acceptance, that the steady voice meant compliance. She was wrong, too. Both of them looked at Kira, and they saw what they expected to see. What they had decided, before she ever sat down, I was all she could be. And that is the specific trap that arrogance sets for itself. The greatest thing Kira ever did was not file the patent, not sign the contract with Gregory, not take her team with her. The greatest thing she did was refuse. For 15 years, in small ways, in private, in the margins of a career that didn't always see her, to agree with what they thought she was worth. She kept building when no one was watching. She kept thinking when the credit went elsewhere. She kept showing up, not for them, but for herself, and for the 6 people on her team who were watching and learning and becoming who they would become partly because of who she chose to be. That's the real story. That's the part that doesn't fit in a press release. If you are watching this, and you are somewhere in the middle of your own version of this story, if you are in the conference room right now, or the years leading up to it, or the long, quiet stretch afterward where you're not sure what comes next. I want you to hear this. The thing they underestimated about you is the same thing they'll eventually have to reckon with. Keep building. Keep documenting. Know what belongs to you, and know it precisely enough that no one can take it. And when the moment comes, and it will come, you won't need to raise your voice. You'll just need to be ready, like Kira was ready. Before I go, I want to say something directly. My mother told me nobody would watch a channel like this, that these stories don't travel, that I wouldn't hit 1,000 subscribers. Maybe she's right. But I think the fact that you're still here, at the end of this video, says something different. If this story moved you, if it reminded you of someone you know or something you've lived through, share it with them. Leave a comment below. Tell me your story, or the story of someone you know who deserved better and built something extraordinary anyway. And if you haven't subscribed yet, I would be grateful if you did. Not for the numbers, but because every story on this channel exists for the person who needs to hear that they are not invisible, even when the people around them have decided to look through them. These tales matter. I'll see you in the next one.